story two is about the enhanced games, and we bring this up about as it being the opposite end of adaptation in sport right now. Did you tune in to the enhanced games yourselves? We didn't actually, but I've seen a huge amount of coverage about it since then. So the enhanced games is basically a sporting event that aims to push biological limits and permits the use of performance-enhancing drugs. This is obviously very antithetical to the majority of governed sports globally, where doping is illegal, and of course medals can be stripped if you're found out to be doping. Very badly thought of. It's all about winning well for the majority of sport governing bodies. This is the opposite end to that. Performance enhancing drugs are allowed, encouraged, and it was billed as this new frontier where records would be rewritten en masse, but the reality turned out to be somewhat more restrained. So across 22 opportunities in swimming, track and weightlifting, just one performance in swimming surpassed an existing world record. That, of course, won't be recognised by World Aquatics. It took place and the world record was broken by, I think, 0.8 of a second in swimming. It's not a world record that we were recognised by the governing body because the guy who broke that was under performance enhancing drugs. 3 winners out of them all as well were athletes who competed clean. So although you could join the enhanced games with performance enhancing drugs, you didn't have to. So 3 of the winners actually weren't using those that went on to win. They were Fred Curley in the men's 100 metres, and Evelyn in the women's 100 metres, and Hunter Armstrong in the men's 50 metre backstroke. So even with enhanced inputs and recovery, performance in this case shows us that it remains stubbornly human, i.e. this is not predictable at all. What we're made to believe is that by including performance-enhancing drugs, you're going to smash all of the world records. But it's not the case, because human beings who are working really hard on their performance in different ways, it's not as simple as doping and winning is what we've found out. So the reason I mentioned this on this podcast, because we're all about climate and environment and social sustainability, the reason I talk about it is because I reflected it's very interesting that this is really the opposite end of the adaptation necessity scale. We talk a lot about climate induced extreme heat, which means many athletes are training and playing and competing with integrity and trying really, really hard to maintain that integrity, but also perform and reach the highest levels of their sport in an environment that's becoming increasingly hostile. We're seeing athletes perform over this ever collapsing safety floor. And then at the other end of the spectrum, this enhancement event is about choosing to go outside of established sports governance to push performance beyond an existing ceiling. They're trying to break records through the use of performance-enhancing drugs. And really, now that the games are over, the website's still live, and what we see is like a storefront there for what they're calling treatments and guided pathways around your unique biology, essentially to sell products that are going to help you get there. So opening the door to this being more freely available. So I see both ends of the spectrum here. On one end, we have got athletes training and competing tirelessly in increasingly hostile conditions to reach the top of their game and to win, whilst doing so with integrity and winning well. So they are being forced to adapt their physiology to continue to compete with integrity. And then at the opposite end of the spectrum, we have athletes, which, no shade, they are choosing to adapt their physiology by using external sources to try and reach the upper limit of that through a choice, not through a necessity. So it's just a really interesting example of both ends of the spectrum. And also an interesting one to watch in terms of the development of this. What is this opening the door to? Where is that going? And how attractive is it to athletes? A lot of discussion about that online. Really, really interesting stuff. And one to look at for the future as well. So I guess the closing on that is the athletes that are competing in extreme temperatures are having to adapt because of that. And then the ones competing in the enhanced games are choosing to adapt and treating their physiology as something to be modified beyond natural limits by choice. Really, really interesting opposite ends of the spectrum.